Ready for a deep dive. Today, we're cracking open Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
We're going beyond the surface, really trying to unpack his thoughts on human nature, morality, or the big stuff.
We're digging into the excerpts like, think of it as intellectual surgery, but more fun.
And like surgery, we're going to see some fascinating structures underneath it all. What's so compelling about Peterson is how he ties together psychology, philosophy, even ancient myths to get at what makes us tick.
Totally. One of the first things that struck me was this idea that humans, we crave order. In a chaotic world, we're almost obsessed with finding meaning, even when life feels totally random.
Like we're programmed to search for those patterns, right? To
Yeah.
make sense of all the noise. Peterson argues this isn't just some abstract idea, it's essential, like our need for food or shelter. He even traces it back to ancient myths. Religious texts like these stories were humanity's early attempts to impose order on an unpredictable world.
And this is where those 12 rules come in, like a user manual for the human psyche.
Think of them as a framework, a way to navigate life's messiness. But here's where it gets even more interesting. He's grounding these rules in his academic work, Maps of Meaning.
Okay, there's a whole other layer here. We're talking about how humans make sense of the world on a fundamental level. Now, I gotta ask about the lobsters. Peterson uses them to illustrate this order and hierarchy, and it's one of the most talked about parts of the book.
Right, who knew lobsters could be so relatable? But seriously, Peterson's point is that lobsters, like us, have these dominance hierarchies built in, biologically.
So are we hardwired for, like, cutthroat competition? Is that the takeaway?
Not quite. Understanding those hierarchies is about understanding ourselves. It's not about encouraging ruthless ambition, but recognizing that these patterns, they're in our biology, our history, our social structures.
So it's about being aware of the game so you can choose how to play, not necessarily becoming the alpha lobster.
Exactly. And speaking of games, Peterson also digs into this idea of positive feedback loops, which can be both our best friend and worst enemy.
Wait, so not just like that screeching sound you get from a microphone?
Definitely not. Think of it like this. A positive feedback loop is any cycle where a small action leads to a result, and that result then fuels more of the initial action. Imagine a snowball rolling down a hill.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. How does the snowball effect play out in our lives?
Let's take social anxiety. You were nervous about a presentation, right? That anxiety might make you sweat or stutter a little.
Oh, I know the feeling. Then you start noticing those physical reactions and it makes you even more anxious. It's like a vicious cycle.
And those what-if thoughts snowball, and suddenly you're convinced the whole presentation is doomed. That initial worry kicks off a chain reaction. Same thing can happen with procrastination. Negative self-talk, but it can be positive too.
Oh, right. Like when you start making progress on a goal, that early success can fuel your drive to keep going.
It becomes an upward spiral. So it's about recognizing these loops, whether good or bad, and figuring out how to harness their power.
Now, you mentioned Maps of Meaning earlier, for those of us who haven't read it. What's the key takeaway?
It's dense, but it boils down to this. Humans are meaning-making machines. We have to understand the world and our place in it. Peterson argues this search for meaning, it's essential for our well-being.
So it's not just achieving goals, it's about a deeper sense of purpose, our place in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. It's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves, whether that's through relationships, work, spirituality, even our pursuit of knowledge.
Speaking of connecting, Peterson talks about the study on minimal group identification. It shows how easily we form biases, even towards strangers.
It's kind of crazy, right? They found that even when you divide people into groups randomly, like if they overestimate or underestimate dots on a screen,
There's still this favoritism toward their assigned group.
it's like our brains are wired for tribalism. And it gets wilder. This bias, it's not just about who we like more, it impacts how we act. In one study, people were willing to give up more money to their arbitrary group, even if it meant getting less for themselves.
Wow, makes you realize how deep these biases run. Even tiny things influence our behavior.
And you have to think about prejudice, discrimination. If we develop biases that strong from basically nothing, imagine how much stronger they become with social conditioning, cultural narratives, personal experiences. It makes you think.
It's a lot to unpack.
Hmm.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Peterson really challenges the self-help world, especially this idea of positive illusions. Why is he so down on looking on the bright side?
It's not that optimism is bad, but Peterson says clinging to this rosy view, it can actually hold us back. Real growth, real progress, it often comes from facing the stuff we'd rather avoid, those uncomfortable truths.
So it's like those positive affirmations, they might feel good, but could stop us from actually improving.
Like building a house on sand. Looks good at first, but the first storm, the whole thing crumbles. Peterson's point is true mental health. It comes from facing reality head on, not hiding behind illusions.
So instead of everything is awesome when it's clearly not, it's about acknowledging the tough stuff so we can actually deal with it.
Exactly. And that takes self-awareness, which, let's be honest, can be painful. But Peterson argues that willingness to confront our shortcomings, that's where growth happens. He even uses Adam and Eve to explain this.
Okay, how does the Garden of Eden fit in?
Think about it. When they eat from the tree of knowledge, their eyes are open to good and evil, right? They become aware of their own capacity for both. Peterson's suggesting that self-awareness, it's a necessary part of being human.
So we all have a shadow side, and true growth means acknowledging those darker impulses, not pretending they don't exist.
Right. It's not about being a saint, but about understanding those parts of ourselves so we can make better choices.
Like we're becoming the CEO of our own minds.
Love that analogy. And speaking of leadership, Peterson wants us to think critically about the narratives we're fed, both personally and culturally. He warns against totalitarian certainty, this idea that one ideology has all the answers.
So don't just follow the crowd. Question those assumptions, even if they're coming from people we respect.
Exactly. True morality, true responsibility, it comes from wrestling with complex issues, weighing different perspectives, making choices based on your own compass, not blind obedience.
So how do we develop that inner compass? Where do we even start sorting through all the noise to figure out what we believe?
That's where those 12 rules come in. Think of them like signposts, tools for taking responsibility, finding meaning, living a better life.
Give me an example. Which rule do you find yourself coming back to?
One that stands out is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Sounds simple, almost silly, but Peterson says our physical posture actually affects our mental state.
Like fake it till you make it, but for body language.
Exactly. He says even if you're feeling insecure, adopt a confident posture. You're signaling to your own nervous system, hey, I got this. I can handle whatever.
So our mind and body, they're always talking, and we can use that to our advantage.
Exactly. It's about taking control, even in small ways, to shift your emotional state. Prime yourself for success.
I like it. What's another rule that resonates with you?
One I think about a lot is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. It's a mouthful, but it gets at this tendency we're way harder on ourselves than we'd ever be on someone we love.
Totally. That inner critic that's always pointing out flaws, but we'd never talk to a friend that way.
Exactly. Peterson says, what if we shifted that? What if we treated ourselves with the same compassion we show others? We'd make totally different choices.
It's like cultivating self-love, but not in a narcissistic way, right?
Yeah.
It's recognizing our own worth, our potential.
Right. It's knowing we're all works in progress. We all mess up. But those mistakes, they don't define us. It's choosing self-acceptance and approaching growth from a place of love, not judgment.
That's huge. Now, I gotta ask about one of the simplest but maybe toughest rules. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Seems straightforward, but we all stretch the truth sometimes, right?
All the time. It's almost like a reflex, avoiding conflict, protecting ourselves.
Okay.
But Peterson says even those small lies, they can snowball, eroding trust, messing up relationships.
It's like what a tangled web we weave.
Right. And untangling that is no fun. Honesty, even when it's hard, that's the foundation for Peterson. Aligning your actions with your words, taking responsibility, living in a way that feels true to you.
So it's not just about being a good person, it's about that inner peace, knowing you're showing up authentically.
Exactly. And it ties back to that need for order. When we're lying, even in small ways, it creates chaos in our own minds and our relationships.
Mental clutter. And that can weigh us down. Now, in all of Peterson's work, is there one story, one idea that really stuck with you?
You know, what's always gotten to me is how he connects personal responsibility and meaning to the bigger picture, what humanity's facing. He talks about this increasingly complex world, how connected we all are, and he stresses how important dialogue is, understanding in bridging those divides.
It's like we're all in this together, like it or not. So how do we talk to each other, find that common ground?
And he's not afraid to get into the big stuff, political polarization, cultural clashes, all of it. Peterson says, instead of retreating into our own little corners, we got to be willing to engage even when it's uncomfortable.
Have those tough conversations, listen to people we might not agree with. That takes courage.
It does, because nobody has all the answers, right?
Hey.
Sometimes the most valuable insights come from the people who challenge us, make us see things differently.
Speaking of challenging, Peterson's thoughts on suffering are really interesting. He doesn't see it as something to avoid at all costs. It's like an inevitable part of being human.
It's hard to hear sometimes, but he argues it's in those moments, those times we're pushed to our absolute limits, that we figure out how strong we are. He even brings it back to the hero's journey, like in those classic myths.
We're not talking about just everyday annoyances. We're talking real hardship, the kind of stuff that really tests us.
Exactly. Think Odysseus, right? His epic journey home, Frodo and the ring. These heroes, they face danger, loss, their own inner demons. But going through all that, that's how they find their purpose. They become symbols of resilience.
So we all have our own hero's journey. And in those dark times, that's where we discover what we're really made of.
Yeah. Embrace those challenges, not because suffering is fun, but because that's how we grow, how we learn.
Smooth seas don't make skilled sailors, as they say. We need those storms to make us stronger.
Love that. And Peterson's own life, it shows this. He talks about his daughter's illness, how much it tested him.
It's a really powerful part of the book because it shows even someone who talks about these ideas for a living, they still go through tough times, those moments of doubt.
He's not pretending to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
But he's saying, even when it's really bad, when we're facing suffering, there's still that possibility for meaning, for growth, for finding a way forward.
We're not alone in this. Even when things are tough, we always have a choice in how we respond. We can let those challenges crush us, or we can let them shape us, make us stronger.
And that's where he brings in this idea of sacrifice. When we give something up and we put others first, that's often where we find our purpose, our fulfillment.
You get what you give, right?
Yeah.
When we focus outward, when we act with courage, compassion, even when it's hard, that's a different kind of strength.
It is. And Peterson connects this back to mythology, religion. Sacrifice is a huge theme in so many stories. It's like this deep-seated human value.
The hero who risks everything, even their life, for something bigger than themselves. Not for glory, but out of duty, love, a belief in something more.
That's it. Our lives have meaning beyond just our own wants and desires. It's about finding the courage to answer that call, even when it's scary.
So we've talked about suffering, the hero's journey, sacrifice, big ideas. But what about everyday life? What's the takeaway for someone listening who's maybe feeling overwhelmed by it all?
I think Peterson would say, take responsibility. Which sounds simple, but it's huge. It means owning your choices, big and small, and realizing you have power in your own life.
Not just letting life happen to us, but actively shaping our own experience.
Exactly. Setting intentions, making choices that reflect our values, showing up as the best versions of ourselves.
Those 12 rules, they're not rules exactly, more like guidelines for navigating life, finding meaning, becoming more resilient, more courageous.
Right. Life's a journey. There will be good times, tough times, all of it. But it's in those moments, those choices, that we're writing our own stories.
And what I love about Peterson, he doesn't shy away from those big questions, the existential stuff. He tackles it head on.
Makes you think, right? Challenges us to question things, to engage with the world in a meaningful way. And reminds us that even with all the chaos, there's still hope, there's still beauty, there's always a chance for growth, for connection, for purpose.
Beautiful. So if you're looking for a guide for meaning, for becoming a more courageous, more purposeful you, check out 12 Rules for Life. It's a journey, it'll challenge you, it'll inspire you, it might even change how you see the world.
And hey, maybe you'll be inspired to stand a little taller, pet a lobster, finally clean your room.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little life-changing.
Yeah.
Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep those spines straight.